What I'm going to take you through this evening is really, now I've got to, every time you do this, there are slightly different ways of organizing it, is really tracking bugs in healthcare is really what I'm going to tell you about. And tracking has two meanings here. There is an aspect that's got to do with how we learn from the past. And what you might not really appreciate in the front of your mind, but is very much the case, in a hospital, they've been collecting information about patients in all kinds of ways and storing it electronically for 20, 30 years. And what is odd about that is once it's collected, it's lost. It's never used effectively again. It's gone. So, and we're going to dwell on that a little bit, because what we've done is to try and track people from all this data that's accumulated in lots of little silos around the hospital and has been lost to us. And can we learn from the history bound up in those databases and therefore retrieve information that help us understand what's happening now? And to do that, to find people so that you know what's happened to them in the hospital over many years, needs sort of quite an electronic sleuth to track them and find them. So that's one concept. The other concept is that obviously in hospital people suffer infection. Infection comes from germs, and I'm going to show you two examples this evening. And can we find how the germs get to infect people? So can we track germs? So we're going to have a system for tracking people and a system for tracking germs. And the way we track germs is very much akin to an issue that's been quite controversial. I hope because we're tracking germs it's not going to be controversial. In fact, it would be very bizarre if it was controversial. But the controversial aspect of tracking things is this whole idea of a DNA database. And now, a database of germs might be regarded as less offensive than a database of people, and therefore being able to track criminals. And there's a lot in common with that tracking, and probably there are a couple of causes célèbres that have occurred over the years, and one of them is somebody called Rachel Nickell, who you might remember was murdered on Wimbledon Common in a most bizarre and horrific way, leaving her child hanging on her body. And the police pursued some rather lonely figure that lived on the edge of Wimbledon Common called Colin Stagg. And the judge eventually threw out the prosecution against him. And everybody always wondered if that was him. And then eventually, through a DNA database, they found the perpetrator 13 years later through a match. And it's that concept that we use to track bugs. So, this sort of summarizes that in a rather dry way. We get a better understanding of hospital infection. We have this database of all infection events possible. And one of the people that's been key to doing it is sitting in the audience. And we're going to look at two germs, MRSA, but actually its real name is Staphylococcus aureus, and I'll tell you more about that. Clostridium difficile. I'm not going to tell you about winter vomiting illness, but we've got the same paradigm, the same issues apply to that. Okay, a little bit of history. Hospitals were very bad places to go historically, unbelievably bad places. And this represents what was regarded as the very best hospital in Austria at the time, in Vienna. It's the Krams Hospital, which is sort of the birthing hospital. And there was a high-level academic division that all the sort of fancy people in Vienna wanted to attend. And there was the service that the rather more indigent people attended. What was awful is that if you were one of these salubrious women, you had a 15 to 20% chance of dying in that birthing hospital back in you know, the early 1800s. I mean, you forget that. People forget that. Anyway, what was odd that this rather hopeless midwife section had a much lower mortality. And this man, who actually died from a sort of mental, died with a mental illness, not of a mental illness, was a bit nuts, but very observant, probably in current day language would be regarded as a high-level Aspergic type person, was very intrigued by this and developed a view that it was the surgeons who were then, or the obstetricians that were caring for the women, were also doing post-mortems on the women who died and then were transmitting the germs. We've sort of kind of worked it out from the post-mortems directly back to the woman giving birth and at the time of delivery. And the midwives weren't involved in that. And this was the flesh-eating bug sort of story then of what was happened about 10, 15 years ago, group A streptococcus. And he just figured out a little hand-washing system, and all of this dropped down to 2%. And that still remains the best case for hand-washing. We're going to revisit hand-washing. And that's where a lot of that thing. So the whole concept that you have hygiene with your hands goes back to 1943, and there's never been a better experiment. Never. It's bizarre. Okay. This is a little bit of a study that was done. And sometimes I sort of tease the audience sometimes. This was a little observational study, intervention study. There was a mortality of 45% in cases, and something was done at more than halved, went down to 15%. Does anybody know who that is, or when it was? When it was? Any feel? Okay. So that was 20 years later. Only the thing about Semmelweis, nobody knew it was germs. They thought it was miasma in the air that was doing it. And he figured it out without the germ theory to help him. Pasteur was already going at this stage, and there was some sort of idea of germs then. And do you know who this is? This is Lord Lister up in Glasgow. And this was the amputation story and carbolic acid. And they knew carbolic acid had mild antiseptic effects. And you had this great and huge effect that preparing somebody for surgery with an antiseptic agent had a massive bang for the buck. And that's kind of stayed with us. And there's two concepts: hand washing and preparation for surgery. And we'll sort of kind of revisit this a little bit. Some other sections I'm going to go through quite quickly. You're going to please make me go back if I lose you. Okay, have things changed? Well, they have. Just to reassure you a little bit, the risk of dying from puerperal sepsis, that's having babies, or amputation, has probably never been low, matched for historical cases. Never. And matched for age. It's never been safer to be in a hospital. I know that sounds funny, because the media has represented things in perhaps a bit of a different way, and there are good reasons why the media has been upset. I'm not disputing that, but despite that, it's, even 50, and certainly 100 years ago, it was much less safe to be in hospital. Your chances of dying were manifold higher. Okay? But we've still got a problem, and I'm going to go through those. Okay? Staph aureus, I might say, is the germ that was associated with death in the Lister cases, mainly. There was a little bit of Clostridium, but not this one, a different one. And that's still with us. And I'll take you. So, Staph aureus. This is a germ that's co-evolved with man, quite clearly. So it came along with us out of Africa very nicely. And there are a couple of observations. There's a curious relationship. Near a third of people are continuous carriers, and I'm going to come back to that. So, there are about 20 people here, so somewhere around about 8 of you are carrying Staph aureus continuously. And a third intermittent for a few weeks, and a third almost don't carry it at all. We'll come back to that. The whole germ has about 3,000 genes in it. That's about 1/10 of the number of genes you have in yourself. So quite odd because you can't really see it. You have to look at something at about 10,000 times multiplication to see it, magnification. And worldwide, it can be found in, and I'm going to use, by analogy, breeds, the size of which go up and down and invade whole countries. And the reason I'm saying breeds, I'm going to draw the analogy with a dog. A dog is a species. And you get breeds of dogs, you know, Chihuahua and whatever, Retriever, Great Dane. Those are just breeds. Same species, but breeds. Look and behave very differently. And genetically, they're very close. And then within breeds, you get pedigrees. So you go and get your little whatever. So you can look at the pedigree, and it comes from there and this one. And those genetically differ. So you get these degrees of difference genetically. I'm going to come back and look at it. And within Staphylococcus aureus, there are breeds, and even narrower than breeds, the pedigrees that come and cause huge problems. And we're going to look at that and think about that a little bit. And we've learned quite a lot about that. Okay? And this evolution has gone on hugely. It's a very effective survivor. If any of you are gardeners, it's a bit like a bramble. It's a really tough thing that survives all the difficulties of surviving in a hostile and difficult world. One of the biggest threats to it is along came antibiotics and disinfectants. And rarely it's been able to deal with this by catching genes, because if you look up here, about 10% of the genes in a bacterium it gains and loses. In a human, you don't gain and lose genes really unless you get a virus that goes into you, say like HIV or something. Here, this is a huge part of its lifestyle. It's losing and catching genes from its environment. And this does it very well, and that's the way it's been able to adjust to all these threats to its very survival. And one of those survival strategies is to catch the genes that make it resistant to a lot of the antibiotics we use, and it then ends up being called MRSA. And if you look around the world, there are about 3 billion carriers of Staph aureus in the world, on that third, 9 billion people. And we guesstimate that it's somewhere about 30 million people are carrying MRSA. They've got the gene. Just to put things in perspective. So there's a bit of it around. Okay, so we go back to these little pedigrees that come along and bother you. The 1950s, they closed hospitals in the UK, in the United States, in Canada, and all around the world because of Staph aureus problems. They had a hospital Staph aureus, and it wasn't quite a royal commission, but it was nearly a royal commission to investigate this, because you had a big staphylococcal problem, you had terrible infections, the country got very upset, and then forgot about it. So we went through that experience. Not long thereafter, in Denmark, they had a huge MRSA problem in the 1960s that lasted until about 1975. And an MRSA experience occurred in a very substantial way. And when you looked into that, that was a pedigree of Staph aureus, of a breed, right? And there are thousands of breeds of Staph aureus. So this is one very narrow member of that species of Staph aureus that came along and caused a big problem in Denmark. In fact, it was almost a single sort of, it was almost Dolly the sheep that they cloned. It was almost like that. It was a very similar little thing that went around in Denmark, and it just faded away. The Danes, post hoc, like to think they did lots of things to do it. And you read the papers and you read about all the things that they did, but they only started doing them in the sort of 1970s here. It's quite curious, little observation. What's been the experience in Oxford? We can't quite give you the time span that we had in Denmark. We've looked at a little bit more than Denmark, and this is a curious thing. So right back here in 1997, by the way, we've mined that data. We've been able to get all this information about people out of that electronic database that you've put together. So you've been able to reap this information from that thing. So MRSA went up. It reached a peak here in about 2003, 2004, if that was a peak. There's some thought that it might have gone up and went flat and then went down again. John Reed got very excited over here, sort of just at the beginning of 2005, and only things started to really get done a year later. So things were probably going down by the time people started doing anything about MRSA in a very similar vein as they did in Denmark. And then they got very excited and did huge numbers of things, and we're going to revisit that. And all those things that they did, including implementing quite rigorously the things that Semmelweis did, and I'm going to come to that, Staphylococcus aureus, the other much more diverse set of breeds, this is a little, as it were, pedigree of Staph aureus. This one has just gone up and it's replacing this. So a lot of people are congratulating themselves about this and not looking at that. And we've got national data that says that that's happening everywhere. And the difference between these is subtle in terms of the disease people get, the severity of disease and all the other things. And you can ask yourself, why aren't you worried about this? Sort of interesting. And what you've got here is the whole burden of disease caused by this has remained fairly constant. Okay? So that's the summary picture, that's the agglomerated. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that because we've done lots of hard work and we get very depressed if we thought that's all that ever happened. Okay. I'm just going to give you a little sense of what's been done, and with the great help of the infection control team here, and it's a fairly large team, but principally led by very enthusiastic and dedicated nursing staff. Starting in 2006, started to put a huge effort in response to the John Reed fracas that was then taken over by Patricia Hewitt, and then done after that, I don't even remember who did it, Andy, whatever his name is, did it. And we got pretty reasonable hand hygiene compliance. That would be going towards the higher. People get higher than that, but they're usually smaller organizations. And we also adopted all the things that the Department of Health set out as things that really make a difference in the care of patients. And there are a whole lot of them. I'm not going to go through them, and we got pretty high compliance. And these things in yellow should reduce all kinds of infection caused by Staph aureus and lots of other germs. Didn't. Sort of quite depressing. We started to do very intensive things around MRSA when it got a bloodstream infection. If they got it, we'd investigate and ask the clinical teams what they did and didn't do. That used to scare the bejeebers out of them, but it was a very healthy experience for them all. So that was good for them. So we said, gosh, and we sort of saw this little creeping up thing. So we said, well, let's do it for all kinds of Staph aureus. So we'd expect that one to affect MRSA as we would this that's been operating for a long time. But things were going up while that was operating, so that didn't do much. So this might have done something. So we did this, but it didn't do anything. So does this work for anything? We don't know. Then we, starting in September 2008, because it was so hard to work out who had MRSA or not, and we said Staph aureus is the same as MRSA. When the government sort of said, well, you should rub people over with antiseptics who are MRSA, we said, why don't we do it to everybody? It'll be sort of 2 out of 3 that don't really need it, but 1 out of 3 is going to get it, and it's pretty harmless stuff, and it's really a good way of having a bath in hospital, the antiseptic type soap concept. That didn't seem to do anything. We did it in medicine and gerontology. And then we started in a very intensive MRSA screening for elective admissions and a whole set of activities. Well, that might have done something, but we also applied this cleaning thing to patients, particularly going into surgery, in the same way as Lord Lister did. And maybe that hasn't. What I haven't put here, and I'm going to show you, is in ITU and in the renal unit, we implemented a rigorous program around dealing with those little tubes that go into the bloodstream to do dialysis in patients and to give fluids to people in the ITU. Put a huge effort into it, much more vigorously than you might say Lord Lister would have done. And there's some, it's conceptually essentially what he did. Put a huge effort into that. Much of what you see here is trying to interrupt the lifestyle of Staph aureus in its normal habitat, living on people and moving around. This is all dealing with that. If you look at it in the terms of an ecologist, it's niche. What we were doing in terms of, in a sense, this and these line things is saying, this is where we hurt somebody and we create a favorable environment for this germ to take hold. Put all your effort there. Like Lord Lister, so we did that. Okay, so there are going to be 3 slides here. One that goes 98 to 2002, another one. And this is quite hard to follow. It makes a lot of sense to people that understand statistics and the description there, and it's a very powerful technique. And I'm going to do my best to get it across to you. It's now prettier to have curves. This summarizes a huge amount of information. And you've got a line here. If you have stuff below the line, it kind of means things are getting better. If you've got things above the line, it's getting worse. And if these little bars here are below, don't cross the line, it means it's statistically significant. You can say this, you've got confidence that this isn't just some sort of chance madness that goes on. And this is sort of the average. It's not quite the average, but that's a reasonable way to look at it. So you say, oh, things have gone down on average, but if, like here, it's gone down on average, but because it crosses a thing, that could have happened by chance. It's not it may not be a real thing. So and the things to look at, I mean, you've got ICU, renal, this is nosocomial, this is getting things in hospital, and this is bringing in things in admission. And this is MRSA, MSSA, which is the other Staph aureus that isn't MRSA, and that's Staph aureus of both types. So that's them combined. Okay? So if you go to ITU in this first period, you got bloodstream infections were going up, and we won't worry about these ones. It's too complicated. And if you went to the renal, you had bloodstream infections going up for MRSA, so it was going up like that picture showed. And if you went here, nosocomial, it was going up, and from the community, it was going up. So Staph aureus was going up, MRSA was going up everywhere, and these guys, which were the susceptible ones, were coming down. You saw that in the picture overall, and this stuff here overall remained the same. You saw that before. Then there was a period in the middle, and I anticipated that when we looked at that beautiful red, green, and blue sort of curves, and there wasn't huge change, but there was one thing that looked sort of interesting, is here in ICU, bloodstream infections from MRSA seem to go down, bloodstream infections from the susceptible ones seem to go down, and overall it was starting to go down in the bloodstream. And what we did then is change the kind of catheters that we used so that they had antiseptic around them. So you got an effect. And there was a huge campaign to do it, and a huge bang for the buck. Huge. I mean, this is a huge effect. So that was really good. And hard on the heels of that, we did a similar thing in the renal unit. So you were very happy. MRSA was going away and one could see it. But in the bloodstream infections now, in the renal ward, you had a huge effect when we did a similar thing there. A huge effect. And you got a similar huge effect in the renal blood from the susceptible ones, and a huge effect here. We got our effect in ITU mainly, so it remained about the same. And then you come to so in summary, we've got very powerful evidence that doing these things with little tubes that go into the bloodstream in a rigorous, determined way has a huge effect. This is not a new observation. There was some science to support this. And this showed in the general running of a hospital, you could get a huge bang for the buck. And if you looked at all these other areas, that fantastic effort that was put into trying to diminish the way the Staph aureus spread around had very little effect. You could get depressed or excited, or you say, okay, we've learnt a huge lesson. Why don't we put all our energy where we can have a huge effect? And that's a question for us to think about over time. And by looking at these things, we're learning a great deal. Okay, I'm wondering if I should take you through this. I'll take you through very quickly. This is ridiculous, but there are two pedigrees of MRSA that have come through. This one came through first. It's given a name, clonal complex 30. So this is the one that came through first. It's seen to bite you. And what is interesting, we have worked with Brighton in this sense. And this works out the family tree, as it were, of those, how closely or not closely they're related. And you've got this germ. And the way we've done this is we've taken the whole germ and decodified the whole genetic code in it. So we've taken it and we've looked at every little base in it, and there are 2.8 million bases to look at. And you can look at how they related or not related over time and space. Brighton, Oxford, from back 1996 almost through to 2006. And what you begin to see, as you would if you looked at lions from Southern Africa, Northern Africa and India, at a time point you would get, you would get clusters. So that might be the Indian one, that might be North African one, and this pink one might be Southern African one if you looked at lions. And that's how Staph aureus is segregating into these groups over space and time. What is curious is this showed less genetic diversity than you would expect compared to the others. And this was Brighton recent. Okay? And there was a very interesting observation in Brighton in the recent past. They became the worst performing hospital with MRSA control over a very, you see, I've got a friend here who's very persistent. And that we believe correlates with that. So there was something going on in Brighton. So you can use this sort of genetic code to reveal to you patterns, and then we're going to start looking to try and see if we can understand why this became so prominent there at that time. And it's sort of a curious. This is just the other main. I'm afraid a slide from nowhere is going to come up in a bit, but we're not going to. So then what we've done in Oxfordshire, we've looked how Staph aureus is carried again. So I don't know if there's anybody here. Every now and then I meet somebody who's in the study and I have to explain it. Now, I suppose I should know they're in it because I signed all the ethics forms, but I can't. For me to keep track of 1,124 people is beyond me. And they're little nasal swabs, and they followed for 2 years, and we've got a third that carries Staph aureus. What's interesting, only 9 out of these carried MRSA in the community. These people consented to come from the GP practice and enter this. So there's a tiny number of MRSA out there. And after 18 months, we've got a lot of information on these people. Huge amount. And we can start to work out what determines whether somebody carries Staph aureus or not. I'm not going to go through them, but we've got a really good idea why people might carry Staph aureus. Some people might and others not. What is really interesting for us is that even though we can work out some little associations, at the end of the day, there's something about people that isn't how they behave or what they're doing that is determining this. It's been constant over time. And we've got other data. If you're coming into a hospital and going into an intensive care unit, you stay there and leave the intensive care unit, it still breaks into these thirds. And there's something quite fundamental about a person, whether they carry it or don't carry it. And I suspect that's in your genes. And we're going to do something to try and understand that. Okay, if you take one of these people and you look up at their nose at their Staph aureus, and you say, okay, you've got this little Staph aureus, it looks the same one, is it staying the same up your nose or is it changing? And we've been able to look at them up the nose, lots of little examples of it. So this is the same little pedigree, and we can see that pedigree evolving away from its past and becoming a different germ over time. And this is just one little depiction of how it's developing. And these little points here accumulate the genetic differences in terms of maybe a mutation. One base pair changes or loses a bit of DNA or gains another bit of DNA. And that's happening over time. So this one here, we didn't reappear here, but the yellows were at time 2 months, and then time 4 months you found another one over there, you found something over there. So every 2 months, in a way, these little germs are remodeling themselves and changing. And one day, one of them comes together and puts together all the ingredients that makes it very successful. And I suspect once every 5 or 10 years, one of them develops into a wave that goes through the country, that maybe as an MRSA, maybe as a germ that goes through neonatal intensive care units, leading to scalded skin, maybe closing hospitals in the 1950s or whatever it is. And you get a very successful something that goes through. Swine flu last year comes as a wave and goes through the population. Okay. Am I going to have about 10 minutes? Yeah, go on. Okay. Staph aureus is an old one. This is 1978, and they managed to work out if you took antibiotics, you got a condition called pseudomembranous colitis due to a toxin producing Clostridium difficile. It really was only just about discernible before 1978 amongst humans, and since 1978 it's become a big problem. In fact, if you were one of the managers at Stoke Mandeville or Tunbridge Wells, you'd say it became an overwhelming problem, sufficient to get rebuked in Parliament. I mean, they were told they were very dastardly people, and they might have been, they may not have been, I don't know, but they feel very sore about it. And there's a story here. It makes your colon feel very sick, and that's what a normal colon looks like. Okay, we've got a whole bunch of projects. We're trying to understand it. So we got this little warehouse, and starting in 2006, we started culturing all the stools that proved positive. So you do a little test to see if it's got the toxin in it. That is thought to predict the germs there. But you go, well, I wonder if it does. So we try and grow the germ. We learn more about it. We developed a sequence typing scheme so that we could tell little differences from each other and learn about it, because nobody really had a good understanding. We had to get a lot of ethics approvals to do this. This data warehouse is approved by the National Information Governance Board, and they look after us very well. If you're a member of the public, from our point of view, they give us so many hoops and hurdles to jump over, you can't imagine it, to make sure data is safe and secure. And it's probably, it is not only probably right, it is certainly right, but boy, it makes our research quite difficult. So we've got up until, where's the date here? 2006, no, we come up to, the date's no longer here, I took out a bunch of stuff, but it is basically the end of last year, sort of December 2009. We had almost 2,000 germs we had a little type on. And what was interesting, there were 650, about 30% of the total, which would be around about 2,500, 600, 25 to 30%. We didn't grow the germ. So even though this little thing said the germ was there, it wasn't. We go and tell patients they've had the germ, but we didn't grow it. We can't go back and untell them that. And we get fined for having too much C. difficile when they probably didn't have. And we'll visit that a little bit, so quite funny. Okay. This again is the whole concept of breeds, species, breeds, and pedigrees. These are basically breeds of Clostridium difficile, and each one of these is a little pedigree, as it were. And we'll come back to this. This is a little Rottweiler, this is a little Rhodesian Ridgeback, and that's a little Chihuahua, and that you will see is probably true. This just gives you an idea of what's happened over time. We've typed them. There's one type that was very prominent here and has disappeared, and the little Chihuahua that had lots of breeds in it is sort of represented very prominently there. And there's one there that's the Rhodesian Ridgeback, as it were, that was very prominent and sort of disappeared. We don't really know why. This is how we tested. We went mad testing people. We were told to test more and more and more and more and look for more and more and more cases, and we did it dutifully, which kind of happened. And these are going to be slides I'm going to go through very quickly. This is what's happened to Clostridium difficile. For people in the hospital. It's gone up, it peaked around about 2006 and it's kind of gone away. We won't worry why there are 3 lines there, but that's the sort of description of what's happened. If you didn't come into the hospital and your only exposure was sort of outpatients and clinics and things, there's a little bit of disease and there was a different curve, but it was much flatter with a little bit of a peak that wasn't too different from the peak that you had up above. And if you never came into hospital, had no contact with it, you've got a different curve. You had very little to begin with, and then what looks like more now. So if you're in the community, things are getting a little bit worse now, and if you're in the hospital, a little bit better, maybe. I don't know. We'll look at that and think about that. Okay, this is looking at it in a slightly different way. This is looking at people that have rarely been in the hospital, and that's what's happened there. This is people that have, I must get this, that the green is people that have had very little hospital exposure to mean much, and it's sort of reflecting in the hospital that things seem to be going up there. And this line here is recent hospital exposures, but not in the hospital. So you've got something that's behaving not terribly different from this, that's going away if you've had hospital exposure. So you get a sense that what's been maybe in the community is going away, and that's in the community. I'm going to flip through to here, and in the community, you've definitely got something that's going up. So this is really something being caught in the community. The Chihuahua type thing, we would guess, and we will go through that now. This is the Rhodesian Ridgeback version. And for those that know the jargon for this, this is the hypervirulent 027 clone that was recognized the problem at Stoke Mandeville and Tunbridge Wells. There was a huge amount of it, and it's going away. We like to think that we did things in the hospital to get rid of it, but I'm not sure. Depressing to think it isn't, because boy, did we do things. I can't tell you the things we did. It's sort of quite interesting. And these are the little Chihuahua guys, and they're coming up now. And these guys here are the ones that didn't grow. And there was a big problem over here, and the company keeps changing how the test works. So we get, depending where you are in the year, you either get more or less false positive tests, which can drive you nuts. Okay, that's the sort of thing, and that's in the community, it's a similar thing. So you've got this one starting to go up in the community quite dramatically. And that is a new problem. Okay, markers of disease. Okay. And this is what really got people into a lot of trouble. If you look at each one of those, this is, if you didn't test positive and you have some diarrhea and have a test, this is what, 5% of people, not far off it, who are in hospital die within 2 weeks. But that's where a lot of people who are at the end of their life come to hospital. And so you get end of life death. So that would be close to a baseline. You didn't grow it, it's a bit higher. And let's not worry about that. But then you had an orange one on the thing. That was the Rottweiler. Got quite a high mortality. About a third of people that get it sort of seemed to die in 14 days. And then those were other groups, and that was the Rhodesian Ridgeback guy, and that's the Chihuahua. And so you got huge differences depending on what sort of breed you got maybe even what type of pedigree you got affected whether you died or not, if you got it, which is sort of quite curious, because you want to know what it is in the germ that does it at one level. If you look at the Chihuahua group, which are very varied, with lots of different lineages in it, some you can get, and here we've got one that we've had 48 people come in with it, and some get it again, so it's 57 have had episodes with it. Nobody's died. So you even get this variation in other sets. So that, to us, is scientifically a very interesting question, and it might even be of practical importance, because you can adjust treatment if you knew these sorts of facts. You don't have to look at death, you can look at what happens to your white count. And if you look at your white count and you have toxin positive, your white count goes up. If you don't grow it, it doesn't go up, so that's a false positive. So 30% of the cases that we report as positive don't have the disease. So that's sort of going to be something that we're going to try and help reporting and targets with in due course. And if you look at the Chihuahua versus the Rottweiler versus the Rhodesian Ridgeback. This is the Rhodesian Ridgeback, that's the Rottweiler, and this one here is the Chihuahua. So it affects your body in different ways, and we can look at this in lots and lots of different ways, and that comes from mining that database again. And then we have a look to see if people transmit. This is the one that didn't kill anybody, and we do a very careful study of that, mining that database, to see where people had collisions where they might have passed it one to the other. And we do a very liberal definition, a collision on a ward out to a year. And if we got this little pedigree of Clostridium difficile that didn't tell anybody, we got 1, 2, 3, 4 collisions of people. And then we asked us, just took one of them and we said, okay, that little collision should have genetically the same kind of Clostridium difficile. We went and decoded the 4 million bases, 4.5 million bases. That's a 4 million places, 4.5 million places it could be different. We looked to see if we could just see that they were different in this little pedigree. And this is a complicated slide. Believe me, this just tells you they're different. There were 184 places that those two were different. So this would have been like the police arresting Colin Stagg on the Wimbledon Common, and this would be like the judge saying, no, it isn't. These people got falsely punished. Then we go to, this is this long way around, but we'll deal with it. We've got another pedigree, and you've got a cluster here, cluster there, cluster here. We thought this cluster looked interesting, so we took 4 from here, 1 each from there, and we looked at their whole genomic sequences, and the 4 that came from the one had no differences in them, and each was very different from the other. So this little pedigree came into this environment at least 3 times from this little bit of data we've done, and they were not all related. So it wasn't like the hospital was the source for all of it. They came from somewhere else. But once in, it spread around the hospital a bit. This one did. I'm not going to show you that. So here you can get a data where you can start to work out how long the period of transmission at one extreme could be, and that this tells you it's about 60 days. Outside of 60 days, the chance of a transmission event happening is very, very low. Okay? That's one thing. And what we've been able to disassemble this, which is kind of mind-blowing, you can say, how long is somebody infected for? And that goes out probably for 3-4 months, diminishing as time goes by. How long can somebody incubate for? No, infected for, is no more than 30 days. How long can somebody incubate for? That goes out to about 3 months. So you might catch it and it's sitting in you and waiting until you get antibiotics. And then we looked at a dirty ward effect. So if somebody been on a ward with it, and then all the collisions are with the ward there after they had left, you looked at those collisions to see if you ever got a connection again, and you didn't. So you don't have a dirty ward effect. And we've got very powerful evidence to say there's no dirty ward effect, which is kind of mind-blowing. So we're doing a lot of revalidation of that, because that has huge implications. because we've worked on the assumption that this is a dirty ward disease. Not only, but if you say this is only in the person at the time, that really has huge impact on how you manage it and focus the resource and scarce resource we have. And not that I want to encourage wards that aren't perfectly clean, but you could think about keeping wards clean in a different way. Because at the moment, we really pour a huge amount of resource into aspects of that that might not be necessary. You could get the aesthetic effect a different way. Okay, so and when you do all of this, only about 20% of cases can be linked to another, and this Rhodesian Ridgeback is 30 to 40%, and that just had a huge hospital explosion, and since then all that transmission is diminishing and going away. So there are different phases to this, and we have to sort of think about how you manage that. So if you get one of these ones that comes in that's very successful, one of those pedigrees that's got something special about it, you have big problems. And the genetics shows it, and we've got mine this database and show it. But what is interesting, about 80% of people, we can't find the donor. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I mean, we're doing all sorts of things to improve diagnostics for C. difficile, and we've participated in a huge trial for better treatment, and there is a better treatment that's just about to go through regulatory approval. You know, this is just a small number of people that recognize this is personally, this has been a huge effort that goes beyond us here. We've got funding from other sources here, the Wellcome and the MRC, to do this, and we're doing it across the country. So Leeds is involved, Brighton's involved, Birmingham and other work that we're doing is involved. And we've been very privileged to get the money and do lots of work on this. And thank you for listening.